Good evening, good evening. How is everyone today?
Wonderful.
All right, let me give you some in the news. There's a lot of things going on. I'm not going to comment on the government shutdown because our government is messed up. It's messed up royally. We'll talk to you a little bit about it later on, but let me tell you a little bit about in the news what's going on. This is a little bit about our government. And so as I show you this, you can see it. This is socialism. This is Ocasio-Cortez proposes, I'll get it out, it's the Polydent, 70% tax rate to fund Green New Deal. Wherever it's been tried, true socialism as an economic model has been a resounding failure in literally every case, as evidenced in places like Venezuela and Cuba, as you've been told, the latter which has elements of communism thrown in for good measure. And yet it is the model that leaders around the world continue to push, as though trying it one more time will finally yield positive results. Nowhere is the push for socialism more confusing than in the United States, and that's absolutely true, where the capitalistic economic model has led to the greatest economic expansion and creation of wealth among the largest number of people than in any other country throughout history. Nevertheless, socialism has several supporters in the newly seated 116th Congress, and already backers are proposing that the very same measures that have doomed socialism as a successful economic model around the world. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who, by the way, in my opinion, should never be in the Congress. She should be on instead. Who has proposed a Green New Deal that, if it were to ever become a law or policy, would be the biggest expansion of the federal government since our founding. Wants to pay for the tens of trillions of dollars it would require by, wait for it, taxing the rich. A lot, like 70%. Now that may sound like, wow, she's taxing the rich, but any tax that the federal government puts in is an incremented tax. So if you're making any type of money, if you're not poverty-stricken, you're going to pay more taxes. In an interview with Anderson Cooper for CBS News program 60 Minutes, Ocasio-Cortez made a number of historically incorrect and wholly inappropriate statements to justify leveling new tax rates of between 65 and 70% on Americans at the tippy top of the earnings. Now listen, Ocasio suggests that the clip in her esteem, people should be doing more to pay their fair share. This is socialism, by the way, taking from the haves and giving to the have-nots. You live in a capitalistic type of nation. If you want to work hard and earn a lot of money, you should be able to keep that. Somebody say amen. Well, listen to what this is and how it goes on and how it ends. So when Cooper pressed her how she could possibly pay for the deal, she pointed to a progressive tax rate system of 1960, explaining if you earn $0 to $75,000 a year, you pay 10% or 15%, and of course it goes up to 70%. But once you get to the tippy top of your 10th millionth dollar, something you see tax rates as high as 70%. That doesn't mean all 10 million are taxed at an extremely high rate, but it means that as you climb up this ladder, you should be contributing more. What Ocasio-Cortez gets wrong about her plan is everything. For his part, Cooper called it radical. Ocasio-Cortez said, well, there are other radical things that happened. The Emancipation Proclamation was radical. She said Franklin Delano Roosevelt made the radical decision to establish programs like Social Security. What is it about Democrats, or in her case, democratic socialists, that makes them believe government should have the authority to confiscate by force most of a person's wealth so that they can then dole it out to others who did not earn it? Of course, the answer to that question is the Democrats and socialists crave power, and the best way to gain it is to control the masses by making them dependent upon and subservient to big government. Now, whenever I talk about Democrats, I usually get somebody who wants to text me and tell me that, why am I picking on Democrats? I'm picking on Democrats because they're totally wrong. They're liberal. There's a liberal agenda they have. I'm not saying every Democrat is wrong in their personal life, but their agenda is wrong. Their platform is wrong. What Democrats want to do is they want to take all the money and get as much as they possibly can from individuals and then give it out in social programs. Now, I understand a balance there. I understand that Republicans have their own offset on another side, but you cannot make people dependent on the government. I mean, we see it right now with the government shutdown. We see people bemoaning the fact that 800,000 employees of the government don't have a paycheck. If they weren't working for the government, they would. How many understand what we have a big government? And so with that big government, we are dependent on them. And that is the wrong way to have a country, to have capitalism. It's the wrong way to be dependent on a government. Cortez needs to go back wherever she came from and stop her silliness, because that is socialism and it doesn't work. All right, let me continue to go on because I'm going to be on a roll tonight. New Congresswoman displays map with Israel replaced by Palestine. You got to wonder what's happening in our Congress. Here it is. This is Congresswoman Rasheda Talib, a Democrat from Michigan, displayed a map on her first day in the House of Representatives with a note posted over Israel that read Palestine. Let me reiterate what I've told you over and over again. There's no such country as Palestine. What happened is in 70 AD, the Romans came down, Titus of Rome. They destroyed the temple, fulfilling Jesus' prophecy, by the way, and they renamed that area, Israel, Palestine. They did it to slap the Jews in the face because they were renaming it after the Philistines that the Jews had conquered hundreds of years before. Palestine and Philistines have nothing in common other than the Romans taking that name and putting it there. It's stuck. And now the other thing and you'll see it tonight in our 1917 and Psalm 17, you'll see a really good understanding of it. It's stuck. The name Palestine stuck. They're Arabs that are there. They don't have their own nationality. They're Arabs. They're the same Arabs that lived in the Middle East and lived in Saudi Arabia. They're not a different country. They don't have different cultures. The Romans also called Jerusalem, when they conquered it, Ayatollah Capitolina. That never stuck. And so when we talk about Palestine, she thinks there's a Palestine. There is no such thing as Palestine. So she said this should not come as a surprise. Talib has stated that she is in Congress to be a voice for Palestinians in the West Bank. I thought you got elected to Congress to be a voice for Americans. Come on. She's so basically she is sworn in. Since being sworn in, she has used expletive curse words to describe the president while demanding his impeachment, as well as criticizing senators who are trying to pass legislation to strengthen ties with Israel, accusing them of dual loyalty and forgetting what country they represent. I think she's the one that forgot what country she represents. She also recently defended Mark Lamont Hill for comments he made calling for Israel to be eliminated and replaced by a free Palestine from the river to the sea. A frequent rallying call, by the way, by the group Hamas, the terrorist group. So far, other Democrats have remained silent on Talib's disgraceful actions. The party's continual shift to the far left, and they are really shifting to the left, makes that no real surprise, but it still makes them all abettors and enablers and equally guilty. While the map in the U.S. Congress is insulting to those who care about Israel and peace, the map that the Palestinian Authority uses in its education of its children is far more problematic. The official PA's map of Palestine teaches Palestinian children that the geographical area of the state of Palestine encompasses all of Israel. They need to read their Bibles or read a Bible because God promised all of that land to Abraham. It says Fatah takes it one step further by putting the rifle next to the map, indicating that through the rifle, Israel will become Palestine. Listen, America is headed for trouble. We have some lawmakers that are there that really don't get it. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, our Congress are exempt from 14 federal laws that you have to follow. Our Congress makes their own pay raises. Our Congress does not votes on your Social Security, but they do not have their own Social Security. They have their own Social Security, which is not geared to yours. They cannot be charged for any sexual crime if you're a congressman. As a matter of fact, they are exempt from that, and they also have their own health system. So when all the health care was there, and they're talking through their mouths about health care and how they have to reform it, they're not subject to any health care. And so Congress was always meant to be citizen elected people, citizens that would help in generating laws. I think there should be another amendment. I think the amendment should read like this. By the way, another thing, if a congressman spends just one term in office, for the rest of their life they get their congressional pay. I think what should happen is congressmen should do this. I think there should be an amendment passed that no congressman, no Democrat, no Republican, no House of Representative, no senator can pass any law that they're not subject to. Amen. Let me say amen. Maybe I need to run for president on that platform. I'm going to get on my soapbox tonight. Be careful. All right, let me tell you a little bit about economy. I've been telling you about Cashless Society, and it seems there's one after another article that comes out. This is another one. Is cash going extinct? Pubs, hair salons, and restaurants are all turning their backs on notes and coins in favor of contactless card payments. Companies are starting to refuse physical cash as payments as the digital revolution makes notes and coins obsolete. Many firms around the world are beginning to shun cash in preference for a future dominated entirely by digital currency. We're talking about fiat currency. That's what your paper money is, and we know that that's on the way out. So it says this. It says chain restaurants Sweet Green and Dig In the United States have already stopped accepting cash at nearly all of their locations. The firms have joined many Starbucks and UK pubs in moving on from paper notes and metal coins in favor of card and contactless contactless payments. So here's what's going to happen if I could predict anything to you. You're going to have some giants like Amazon.com get to the point. When they start to do that, you're going to see a domino effect, and you're going to see almost every retailer start to demand just cash. Is it coming tomorrow? Probably not. Is it coming soon? Probably so. Let me give you a little bit more as we go on to war and talk to you about that. Everybody knows who this man is? I'm sure. Well, not that man. That's a woman. Everybody knows who that man is. This is Russian President Vladimir Putin. He prepares to deploy an invincible hypersonic missile to enter service in 2019. So the Russian leader, who has declared the Avangard system invulnerable to U.S. defenses, announced its imminent deployment after its final test. The trials took place in in the Russian far eastern region of the Correll missile test range, and were deemed a complete success, he said. On my instructions, the industrial enterprise and the defense ministry have prepared for and carried out the final test of this operation. It's a big moment, he said, in the life of the armed forces of Russia and in the life of our country. Russia has obtained a new type of strategic weapon. Now, why is he saying that? Because he's posturing. He is making some posturing that I'll share with you right now against Israel. First time ever, by the way. And he's posturing also against the United States. He is actually giving a failed threat by this missile. And here's this next article. Russia threatens Israel with a missile attack in response to an Israeli airstrike in Syria last Tuesday. And you know, I told you why Israel is striking in Syria. Syria is a jello nation. Nobody's ruling it. You have Bashar al-Assad, who's an Alawite. He is that's a small minority of Islam. He's not loved by the Sunni. He's not loved by the Shia, and so he's an Alawite. He's backed by Russia. It's a quagmire. You have the Kurds fighting there. You have the Turks fighting there. You have Hamas that's there. You have Syria that doesn't really have an air force at all. To be honest with you, they're backed by everyone else. But Iran is bringing muscle on the ground. And they're bringing weapons through the border, the southern border of Syria. They're flexing themselves to attack Israel. So Israel has been wiping them out every time they come through. I mean, Israel's done this. They probably have had 400 sorties there that have wiped out different things. And Israel doesn't care if there's and here's what Iran's doing. They're bringing them through airports when commercial airliners are landing, so that Israel won't take a risk in firing at these weapons caches that are coming through while there's a commercial airline landing. Israel's not caring. They're taking them out strategically while the commercial airlines are landing. And so they understand the strategy. So Russia has held back for a long time. They've held back probably because America has been very, very involved in it. Now that America is making overtures that we're going to pull out, Russia is more tense in it. It says, in response to an Israeli airstrike in Syria last Tuesday, Russia threatened to respond to further Israeli action in Syria with surface-to-surface missiles against targets inside Israel. An Israeli military intelligence website reported that one such missile was already fired last week. On Wednesday, Israeli authorities broke with protocol and confirmed that the IDF was responsible for an airstrike the previous night targeting 3 main sites that were actively involved in Iranian arms transfer to Hezbollah. Among the weapons targeted by the Israeli strike were GPS-guided missiles. Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Major General Igor Konashekov made a statement to the press on Wednesday that 6 Israeli F-16 jets carried out the attack, which he described as provocative. He also claimed that the attack began 2 Syrian civilian airliners, which I told you, were preparing to land in Damascus and Beirut, and they probably were, but Israel, they were never any threat. Israel just took out the things they were a cover for Iran to bring their missiles through. Koneshkov said that despite their limited response, the Syrian air defense shot down some of the precision-guided bombs dropped by the Israeli jets. He said that the remaining 2 bombs hit the Syrian military 4 miles west of Damascus. So what's happening is we're seeing Russia start to beef themselves up in the southern border of Syria. Now, why is that important to us when we talk about prophecy? Because if you read about the Gog and the Magog war, we know that Russia and Turkey, who have joined an alliance, will bring in their soft jaws and they will come on the mountains of Israel, the Bible says, and they will destroy some of the cities that are there, and then God will raise up and destroy them. That is the war of Gog and Magog. Never before in the history of man since Israel fell has this ever been a headline, ever. And in your lifetime it is. So we know we're getting close because we see the prophecy that's happening in the news. Let me give you another one that's happening in the news. You know that Red China is mentioned in Revelation as the kings of the East, and they are really flexing their muscles. U.S. and China slowly creeping towards open conflict. U.S. State Department has officially issued a Level 2 advisory. A Level 2 advisory means they don't want you to travel to China. Why? I'll tell you what this says. Because China is detaining Americans. If you travel there, they will keep you. They have something called an exit ban. And basically the reason why why that happened is Canada kept a CFO from a Chinese CFO because they suspected her of being a spy. Well, China said that we're going to respond by taking anybody from North America, North America, which is Canada and America, and they're going to detain them. The authorities have asserted broad authority to prohibit U.S. citizens from leaving China by using what's called exit bans, sometimes keeping U.S. citizens in China for years. China uses exit bans coercively to compel the United States citizens to participate in Chinese government investigations, to lure individuals back to China and from abroad, and to aid Chinese authorities in resolving civil disputes in favor of Chinese parties. So if you end up being a subject of an exit ban while you're in China, that means you are stuck there till the Chinese government decides that you can go. And in some cases, that never happens. Of course, the worst case scenario is that they grab you, interrogate the living daylights out of you, and then you're never seen or heard of again. And that has happened. In the aftermath of that arrest, the Chinese grabbed Canadian entrepreneur Michael Spavor after the Canadian diplomat Michael Korvig. They grabbed 2 Canadians because the Canadians grabbed one of theirs. And many people continue to travel back and forth normally between North America and China. I don't think Americans get it. If there's a ban, you don't go there. It means that you're threatened. Meanwhile, talk of a potential military conflict between the United States and China continues to heat up. For example, one Chinese naval officer recently suggested that China should sink a couple of U.S. aircraft carriers. Taiwan's Central News Agency reported that Admiral Liu gave a long speech on the state of Sino-U.S. relations, where he declared that the trade spat was definitely not simply friction over economics and trade, but a prime strategic issue. And if China wants the U.S. to back off, it has to be willing to attack U.S. ships when they intrude in Chinese territory. Now, you know exactly what's going to happen. Matter of fact, so do a lot of other places. The British news article entitled it World War III and a warning. China orders army to prepare for war in 2019. China has told the People's Liberation Army, PLA, that they must be prepared for a military struggle. The terrifying message was published in an editorial in the PA Daily, the Chinese army newspaper. So I read this and I thought, I wonder if this is just fake news, or how is China and how are they militarily? So I did some research for you and for myself. Say thank you, Pastor Mark.
Thank you, Pastor Mark.
You don't have to. I did some research for you to show you the armaments of China and America. I want to juxtapose them to see exactly where they are. Thanking President Obama for gutting our military, which he did. He defunded it and gutted it. China has advanced over us militarily. Here is what I found out. That actually, when you look at China, which is the top one, they have 2.3 million armed personnel, armed forces. We have 1.4 million, by the way. 200 million man army, the Bible talks about. We know that China has, when you're talking about artillery pieces, 13,790 to our 7,000, almost twice as much. Battle tanks, 6,500 to our 2,700, almost 3 times as much. Submarines, most of them nuclear, the same as ours almost. And then you have combat aircraft. We have about 1,000 more than they do. And when we look at battleships or destroyers, they have 17 and 62. The only place that we really go over them. So China is armed better than we are. They are armed better for a conflict. They have more personnel. And so it's a viable threat. So I did another thing. I wondered how much of the defense budget, China, how much of their budget, their GDP, were they spending on defense? Where our line has gone down. That's only from 2000 to 2013, and it continues to soar up. They are taking more and more of their budget and spending it on defense. They are ready for a war. Remember I told you about the Thucydides effect? How many remember that? The second nation always kind of being in the background, looking to kind of overturn the first nation. When the first nation gets sloppy, we have gotten sloppy. We have defunded ourselves. And basically what's happening right now is we are seeing that China is going to be a very viable threat, more so than even Russia. All right, let me give you a little bit of moral decay. Don't you get this warm, fuzzy feeling when you hear the news? How many know God's still in control? I just want you to be aware because you know who's not telling you, Wolfie. So here we go. That is the first bisexual senator with no religious affiliation. I told you America's messed up. There's a reason that the first openly bisexual senator, by the way, who cares this person's bisexual? Do you care? If I were going to run for Senate, I'm not going to tell everybody I'm heterosexual. Who cares? Why is this always an issue for in America? Because everybody's pushing it down our throats. So first bisexual senator, I promise you there are probably other bisexual senators you never knew about it. How many know what I'm talking about? But now everything's front page news. There is a reason that the first openly bisexual senator did not take her oath on a Bible. There's a reason that an atheist website rebuked this article writer for misgendering someone. Simply stated, to embrace the God of the Bible means to embrace his standards. To reject the God of the Bible means to reject his standards. Conversely, to reject his standards is to reject him. This is really not rocket science. Breitbart reported newly elected Arizona Senator Kristen Sinema refused to be sworn in on the Bible, opting instead to be placed her right hand on a book of laws, including the U.S. Constitution and the Arizona Constitution. It's no coincidence that she is the first openly bisexual senator, as well as the only member of the Senate who has no religious affiliation. The only member of the Senate who has no religious affiliation. It doesn't mean she's a terrible person, that she has no moral values at all. And it doesn't mean that she cannot serve the government. Of course she can. There's no religious test for leadership either way. In other words, you can't be disqualified for being a Christian or disqualified for being a non-Christian. But it does mean that her lifestyle and identity are at odds with the God of the Bible. Hence her lack of religious affiliation and her refusal to swear on the Bible. That's perfectly consistent. Over at the Friendly Atheist site, a site which is certainly atheist but not always friendly, Sabetha Kaplan wrote an article titled "Christian Writer Deliberately Misgenders Trans Woman to Defy Social Madness." She's writing about this article, writer. She accuses me, he says, of faith-based bigotry masquerading as Christian love. The truth be told, it's not bigotry to affirm biological realities, and the average transgender activist does not have science on his or her side. By this, I mean that the average person identifying as a transgender is clearly of one biological chromosomal set, but identifies as the opposite. How many understand that? That if you're born with certain types of genitalia. You can call yourself anything, but we know who you are. Okay. That seems parochial to me, but I guess we got to reaffirm it. Yet an atheist website that certainly claims to be rational and science-based embraces transgender activism with enthusiasm, vilifying those who reject it. So why? And why is it that they're doing this? According to Pew Research, 92% of American atheists support same-sex marriage. Or according to the same poll, 87% of these atheists believe that abortion should be legal in most or all cases. So what we're really seeing here is we're seeing a mindset that's against God. We're seeing a mindset that's against His principles. So it's not just I call myself an atheist or I call myself a bisexual or transgender. You are believing in everything that's against Scripture. How many of you understand that? So when you get off the skids, when you get away from God, you're going to have a nation like we have right now. We are reaping the whirlwind today. That's why this writer says, I've argued that the only type of conservatism that can bring lasting change to America is biblically based. And he's right. God-centered conservatism. All other efforts will fall short in the end, and they will. The worldview of an atheist will be a very different worldview than a Bible-based theist. How many believe that? Your view of the world is different than an atheist view of the world. And that means that any true moral transformation in America has to start with a back to God movement. Somebody say amen. It's the absence of God that is our greatest problem today. That's absolutely right. It's not race riots. It's not the division of politics. It's the absence of God. You take God out of a nation, and our founding fathers knew that. You take God out of a nation, and that nation is not going to last. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So speaking of that, anybody know who this is? Somebody has to know who he is. Christian Bale. Who does he star as? He's Batman. Well, let me tell you what Christian Bale did. He also, Satan is the big winner at the Golden Globes, thanked by actor Christian Bale. It would not be a Hollywood awards show without some celebrities injecting politics. They can't just perform and get $21 million a show. They have to tell you what they think. I don't really care what they think. Amen. Just entertain. You know, Johnny Carson, you never knew what political stance he was, did you? You never knew what religious affiliation was, did you? Because he did what his job was. When actors get up there and actresses get up there and tell you their politics, I don't want to hear their politics. Act. How many get it? You're getting $21 million. Keep your mouth shut and act. Read the lines. Don't read your own lines. We don't want your lines. We want the lines that somebody wrote for you. How many are with me? Isn't that the way it's supposed to be? All right. So they just can't help themselves. The production seemed to make an effort to sidestep most chances at political lectures and the usual below-the-belt jokes aimed at those on the top of the political spectrum. However, that did not stop the winners from taking their shots. Of course not. After winning Best Picture, director Bobby Farrelly gave a lengthy speech about race relations in our country. Accepting the Best Limited Series win for the assassination of Gianni Versace, producer Brad Simpson implored people to resist in the streets and at the ballot box because the pampered millionaires in Hollywood have a truly tough life, don't they? But Christian Bale took things to a new depth. The British actor won for his portrayal of former Vice President Dick Cheney in the film Vice, and he took an opportunity to deliver his lowest of shots. Christian Bale made sure to thank Satan during his acceptance speech. And the reason he thanked him is because he was lining up Cheney with Satan. And that's what he was thanking. So, see, Dick Cheney is so inherently evil that Bale needed to draw inspiration from the Prince of Darkness to play him correctly. That's what he was saying. What is perplexing is this need for him to virtue signal after winning an award. You got their approval, you can just scale back on the social posturing at that point. You don't have to. You got an award. You don't have to put your 2 cents in, especially when it's not even worth 2 cents. Well, immediately Dick Cheney's daughter, Liz, she immediately fired back. She posted the headlines a few months ago about Christian Bale, who was arrested for assaulting his mother and his sister. And Liz Cheney tweeted, "Satan probably inspired him to do this also." Touché. All right, let me give you this one. Oxford's having some problems. We talk about religion. Oxford's having some problems. I won't read it to you, but Oxford students want a professor fired for pro-traditional marriage statements. This professor is a well-known seated professor in Oxford. Been there for 20-some years, and he is a political science professor, also a morals professor. So he wrote about how homosexuality will destroy humanity. He wrote about LGBT and how it's an adverse thing. He's not Christian, by the way. He's saying it's going to hurt our societies. He's saying that the only real thing you should be able to ascribe to is a man and woman relationship in a marriage. Well, they got a petition together. They thought they were going to get several thousand people sign it. 350 signed it. That's about it. But they're still going to get rid of him. Oxford's still going to get rid of him because there's so much pressure from that liberal agenda. How many are with me? All right, let me give you another one. Talk about Sharia law. And this is kind of interesting. It's a great article, and I wanted to read a little bit to you. Western apologists, you know what an apologist is? He's somebody who sticks up for religions. That means I'm an apologist for Christianity. Western apologists for Islam have never lived under Sharia law. As someone who grew up in a fundamentalist Muslim country, the continuing spread in the West of apologists for Sharia law is, to say the least, scary. Many of these apologists, however, have no first-hand experience of how it feels actually to live in that part of the world or to be a victim of the day-by-day radical Islam. What is painful is that although many of these apologists have never lived under the Islamic rules, they often act as if they have. First, as Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan correctly said, there is no moderate Islam. Islam is Islam, and he's right. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi also expressed similar views. He said, "We must revolutionize our religion. We must take a long, hard look at the current situation. It's inconceivable that the ideology we sanctify should make our entire nation a source of concern, danger, killing, and destruction all over the world." He's a moderate. And what he's saying is we got to be careful because the whole world's looking at us as radical, and we got to change what we're saying to people. Well, many apologists, nonetheless, when engaged in a debate about Islam, still defend its fundamentalism by deploying implausible shields to deflect incoming questions rather than answer them. These deflections can be seen in conferences, seminars, and media outlets. Instead of addressing underlying issues and facts about fundamentalism, for instance, Sharia law and terrorism, some of these apologists blame other individuals for whatever is being questioned, and it's the fault of someone else. Under no circumstance do these apologists criticize the teachings, even if a few words could, as suggested, bring about some sorely needed updates. Apologists instead find other places to point the finger of blame, often to the West and to America. Some blame Westerners as colonialists and imperialists, even though historically throughout the last 1400 years, it was the jihadists who invaded and colonized the Christian Byzantine Empire, which is now Turkey. They are the ones that invented the slave trade, then conquered and colonized all the Middle East, North Africa, the Balkans, Hungary, Greece, Spain, and recently in 1974, Northern Cyprus. And so they're the ones that have an expansionist type of understanding. They're the ones that are conquering everyone. Yet another deflection apologists use is to omit any mention of the suppression of women, as well as violence of terrorist attacks committed in the name of Islam, even if those took place last week. Instead, many apologists say that Islam is a religion of peace, and you'll hear that over and over and over again. We need to really understand why it says it's a religion of peace. What they leave out, regrettably, is that according to Islam, this peace is to come only after all the world has converted to Islam. Until then, according to Islam, all the world is divided in two: Dar al-Islam, which is the house of Islam, Muslims, made up of those who already believe, and Dar al-Harb, the house of war, made up of those who have yet to believe, who they can take war against. The way they want to get peace is by killing people who don't want to become Muslim. That's a strange way to get to peace. And listen to Quran 8:39, their holy book. "And fight them," us, "until there is no fitna," which means disorder, unbelief, and until the religion of all of it is for Allah. What is odd is that even after countless attacks in Europe just since 2001, when we have all seen and felt the house of war on our flesh, no one ever mentions its existence. Rather, we hear so often, even after terrorist attacks, that Islam is a religion of peace. How come we never hear more about this house of war? Many apologists also remind the world of Islam is not allowed to transgress, but only to defend itself from oppressors. So oppressors are people at sporting events. Oppressors are people that are in the World Trade Center twice. Oppressors are people who are French or German Christian markets. So you kill them if you can't convert them. Someone so inclined might in fact start seeing just about everyone who's not a Muslim or even who is an oppressor. Does it mean then that just by being at a concert or sports stadium or watching fireworks or riding bicycles in a New York park makes you an oppressor? Or being a Christian, or even supposedly the wrong kind of Muslim? And the answer is yes. In Iran, as in similar countries, it is Sharia law, not the West, that imposes executions on gays, treats women as second-class citizens, hangs those who decide to leave Islam, executes minors, suppresses and kills Christians and Jews, stones women to death for even alleged adultery, which can include having been raped. In Iran, imprisons and lashes people for crimes such as dancing, listening to music, having a party, writing poetry, drinking alcohol, going on a date, taking off a hijab, wearing an un-Islamic clothing, being in close proximity to a boyfriend, and coming to Pastor Mark's Bible study. If you did and you were in Iran, you get arrested. So we know that Islam and Sharia law is one and the same, and basically we know that it's something that's trying to take over the world. I've told you, Islam is not a religion. It's a civilization takeover, and that's exactly what that article says. Lastly, let me give you something about God. This little snout weevil's color reminds us, it mimics God and his engineering. There is no greater engineer on the planet than God himself. Amen. Listen to this article, it's pretty neat. It's my last one. Don't clap. All right, the snout weevil's color is mimicking God's art and engineering. What on earth is a Philippine snout weevil? And what does it have to do with Christian worldview? It's no exaggeration to say if we weren't for the amazing design found in nature, much of the best of our modern technologies would not exist. Let me throw something in I know. Anybody ever heard of a bombardier beetle? The bombardier beetle shoots out something from its abdomen that we have used to understand how to make rocket fuel. So nature's told us a whole lot of things. Well, Digital Trend documents a whole collection of examples, from bullet trains that mimic the beaks of kingfisher birds. Every bullet train, the exact angle of a kingfisher's bird is the exact same thing on a bullet train. To high-rises that copy the ventilation systems of termite mounds. This is not kidding. The film Incredible Creatures That Defy Design talks about what's called biomimicry. And yet people all over the technological achievements were not even close to exhausting the riches of engineering and artistry available in nature by the hand of God. One of the most eye-catching examples to emerge in recent months is a tiny insect, a species of beetle known as the Philippine snout weevil. A recent report of World Magazine revealed this miniature marvel's true colors. Literally, you see this beetle has a series of rainbow spots on its wing casings that do something very rare in nature that we can't duplicate. They maintain the same color no matter which angle you view them from. Everything you see in your life, whether it's a TV or digital or something that's even real, whenever you change your angle, that color varies slightly. You may not know that, but it does. This one does not. This has scientists fascinated. Not only is this so-called high-fidelity color rare in nature, it's non-existent in human technology. Not a smartphone, not a laptop, not a tablet, or an HD TV in existence can successfully produce colors that remain true no matter how you look at them. The website Optics and Photonics reported on the joint research by a Singaporean Swiss team who discovered just how this weevil accomplishes this dazzling feat. Each spot in its wing casings forms concentric circles inside each other of color, which cover the full visible spectrum from blue to red in the same order as a rainbow. But unlike most hues in nature, which are generated using pigments, the snout weevil's brilliant design comes from what scientists call structural color. The weevil's spots have a gleaming metallic quality. That is because their color comes from tiny crystalline structures made of chitin that split sunlight like a prism. Isaac Newton said that white light contains all the colors of the rainbow. Here's what I'll just tell you, get away from the technical and tell you what happens here. So they have these spots on them, and they're concentric circles. So those circles have these little tiny iridescent metallic things. So when you look at them, they actually start to pop out. And every time you see them, they're pulsating. And they're pulsating not because of any movement of the beetle, but because the colors are pulsating themselves, something nobody can do. So as the colors pulsate, they give the view of the same color no matter where you look at this beetle. Let me tell you something. If you doubt God, all you have to do is look at nature. Come on, somebody say amen. That's in the news for tonight. I'm going to ask the ushers if they come forward. Let me give you a little bit of announcements. First off,